On this edition of Independent Sources, more evidence that immigrants are helping New York's economy rather than hurting it.
When you see the immigrant communities contributing 1/3 of the gross city product, some $210 billion of economic activity, that's a huge contribution.
And walking 6,000 miles in one man's shoes.
Walking is a way of slowing down, appreciating every block, knowing every street, seeing what happens there, and interacting with the people, most importantly.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Sarah Pizan. A recent report from the State Controller's Office is highlighting the important role that immigrants continue to play in bolstering the city's economy. One of the most significant facts is that immigrants represent nearly half of the city's workforce and account for almost 1/3 of its gross domestic product. The report also found that immigrants were harder hit than native-born New Yorkers during the recent recession, but they quickly rebounded. Gary Pierre sat down with State Controller Tom DiNapoli to talk about these and other findings from the report.
Comptroller DiNapoli, this report is an update from a 2010 report on the economic output of immigrants in New York City or New York State. What have been some of the major changes with this report?
There weren't significant changes. The trends really are still moving in a similar direction, but it updates the numbers, and certainly on the positive side on the numbers, it shows that with the 2011 figures, that the immigrant community has bounced back from the recession. We certainly saw wage loss, as we saw with all sectors of the workforce, but the resilience of immigrants in the workforce has been very, very clear, and you've seen steady job growth once again in terms of not only numbers of jobs, but in terms of the amount of wages generated. So it's certainly not a dramatic difference, but it's updated numbers. We like to have the freshest numbers available.
Well, when we talk about the immigrant jobs, oftentimes we have this image of day laborers, dishwashers, or low-income jobs. Is that what you found in this report?
We found a great variety in terms of the employment patterns. Certainly, some of the professions you mentioned would also add taxi drivers, those involved with nail salons, personal care, those kinds of industries, waiters, waitresses, and so on. But also very significant representation among physicians and surgeons, school teachers, financial planners as well. So the notion that immigrants are only in the lower end of the wage scale is just not the case. In fact, many of the immigrants come to this country with either education already or certainly with a drive for education. So the ability to excel in the professions where you need credentials and educational training, certainly immigrants are well represented in those job areas as well.
Another area, again, combating myth with reality is that people tend to think of, well, some people anyway, tend to think of immigrants as being a burden on government and society. Again, did you find that to be the case in your report?
Well, such an important question, and it's one reason why we want to refresh the report and get the word out there. What we really find is that immigrants have been the backbone of the strength of the city's economy. That's important for the boroughs of New York City. It's important for all of New York State because the city is a big economic driver for everyone else in New York State. So certainly when you see the immigrant communities contributing 1/3 of the gross city product, some $210 billion of economic activity, that's a huge contribution. We estimate that 44% of the workforce immigrant background. So there's no doubt that the New York City economy, which gets much credit for humming along and doing much better than economies in other parts of our state, than economies in other parts of our nation, the impact of the immigrants is very, very positive on that. In fact, when we looked on how the census defines different neighborhoods in the city, and we found for the 10 neighborhoods with the highest concentration of immigrants, we found greater economic activity.
Do you remember them
Yeah.
offhand and share with us?
They were Washington Heights, Corona, Flushing, East Elmhurst, Coney Island were among the neighborhoods that we focused on. And in terms of jobs created, businesses starting up, size of payrolls, by and large, those neighborhoods exceed the citywide averages.
And are you saying like these communities' growth of vitality are largely based on the immigrants' contribution?
Yes, yes. The work ethic, the sense of entrepreneurship. Flushing, I don't think I mentioned Flushing,
Well,
another
of course.
example, and I'm thinking of that too as we're talking about it. So many of the immigrant communities are so rooted in the American dream in terms of starting your own business, starting small and then building. And the importance of that, of course, is that when you hire from the neighborhood, you help expand the employment opportunities. So I think that level of entrepreneurship is a very key part of why we see that kind of growth and that kind of economic vitality in those neighborhoods. But it's all good news. So I think it's important for us to get the message out that when we talk about immigration and the impact, it is a very, very positive one. And certainly from a New York perspective, I mean, we're all connected in some way to immigrants. I'm the grandchild of immigrants, and Brooklyn was where my family went after they came over from Italy. And, you know, that story of coming to the city, putting down roots, doing well, and then maybe over time, like my family, we have to move to the suburbs. And that evolution of a family's life history, it's playing out again now with today's immigrants. But it's all positive and it's all strong. And that diversity that we have in our city, because the other piece too that I should mention in the report, which confirms what we found in the first round, is that we have not only the largest population in terms of some 3 million immigrants, but also the most diverse. You look at other big cities that have high concentration of immigrant communities, you often have a particular ethnic group that dominates that. In New York City,
Like
it's
for
totally
instance,
different.
in San Francisco, you have the Asians. In Miami, you have Cubans.
The
and,
Los Angeles Mexican.
Sure.
But in New York, it's very different. There's tremendous diversity. And that I think, too, is another strength that we have.
You know, what can the rest of the country learn about New York? I mean, it works here, so why is it we have such a hard time embracing this nationwide?
Well, I certainly hope, and your question really gets to the point, we need to put more balance in the discussion that's out there. Too often, immigration, in the context of immigration policy at the national level, it's viewed as a negative. The New York success story is very much tied to the strength and the growth of the immigrant communities. And you look at the fact that the trend from the early part of the 1900s to 1970, the numbers were going very down. We were only about 18% of our population was foreign born at that point. Well, you know, now the number is up to about 37%. So at a time, again, with all the economic struggles, New York City is one of the real bright spots in terms of the national economy, not just the state economy. It's at a time where the percentage of immigrants in our population has been growing again. You know, so when you think over the past 40 years, the percentage is now, really doubled. I think the story for the rest of the nation is immigration is a strength. It adds to economic strength. It adds to the vitality of the community. And I hope that a report like this will better inform the discussion on issues like immigration reform, which clearly they haven't come to a consensus on yet in Washington. Long overdue for them to have a rational national policy on immigration. So these kind of numbers should be a reassurance that immigration is a positive, not a negative.
Is anybody nationally asking you for your opinion?
Well, I hope that they pay attention to this report. We love when we get media coverage such as your show, and we certainly have been picking up not only in the ethnic press that's well represented here on your banners, but in the larger press as well. And I do hope our delegation will take this message back to Washington, and I do hope people in other parts of the country will look to our report. It's on our website. We know we get a lot of hits from even outside of New York State on it. It is a positive story, and it's one that we want to get out.
Thank you very much, Controller DiNapoli.
It's good to be back with you. And thank you for allowing us to unveil our report right here at the CUNY School of Journalism.
Thank you.
You can learn more about Controller DiNapoli's report by visiting the website www.osc.state.ny.us. Still to come, what inspired one man to walk every block of New York City? Before that, Abby Ashola has some other news.
Thanks, Sarah. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic and community media. From El Diario La Prensa, Latinos in New York want representation in Bill de Blasio's administration. The new mayor received little backing from Latino leaders during the primaries, so members of the community think it may prevent the hiring of Latinos for his administration. So far, Mr. de Blasio has been criticized for not considering a Latino as the new police commissioner. The mayor-elect has said that Latinos would ultimately benefit from additional resources invested in the educational system, since less than 60% of Latino students graduate from public schools. Muslims in the Bronx are also evaluating their relationship with Mr. de Blasio. The Bronx Bureau spoke to Sheikh Moshood Iqbal, imam of the North Bronx Islamic Center, who says he believes the safety of Muslims has taken a back seat to the NYPD's surveillance of the community. Ibrahim Gonja, who runs the Bronx Islamic Center in Morris Heights, suggests that the mayor-elect foster a close relationship with Muslims in New York by going from mosque to mosque and meeting with imams. A game of cricket, anyone? The Queen's Courier reports that the sport is becoming increasingly popular around the city. This thanks to the growing number of immigrants from the West Indies, South Asia, and other areas. According to the United States of America Cricket Association, there are currently 7 cricket leagues in the New York metropolitan area. Some also credit this growth to the NYPD's cricket tournament, which has gone on for the past 6 years, with players ranging from 14 to 19. And finally, the Fashion Institute of Technology is highlighting the LGBT influence on America's style transformation. The exhibit, titled A Queer History of Fashion, From Closet to the Catwalk, shows that even before Irish writer Oscar Wilde arrived in America in 1882, sporting colorful breeches, top hats, and extravagant coats, other LGBT individuals made a considerable mark on America's fashion evolution. The exhibition also highlights the 1920s and 30s, when lesbian fashion served as inspirations to haute couture designers like Yves Saint Laurent. The exhibit runs until January 4th. Those were just a few headlines from the ethnic and community media. Independent Sources will be back right after this.
Thanks for staying tuned. You know that old saying about not really knowing someone until you walk a mile in his shoes? Well, Professor William Hemreich has walked 6,000 of them all over New York. The City College sociologist spoke to Gary Pierre about how well he got to know New York City as he trekked through the boroughs for his new book, The New York Nobody Knows.
Bill, there are probably hundreds of books about New York. Why another book about New York? Why is this so necessary?
This is a look at New York from the inside. It's an attempt to capture the heart and soul of the city. And this is, as the late Mayor Koch told me, the first book that is based on a person who walked the entire city. And that's 6,000 miles. So my goal was to talk to people in the communities, to walk the streets, to walk almost every street, and to learn how this city works from the inside.
And what did you learn?
Perhaps the most important concept to emerge from this book is that New York is really a series of communities, hundreds of communities around the city. Now you'll say, well, what's new about that? We know it's different neighborhoods, we know it's Flushing, we know it's Hamilton Beach in Queens, we know it's Canarsie, but the difference is that these communities, the people see themselves as though they were living in small villages. People will talk about the city, it's my block, it's my street, my store, my grocery store. And they do feel a sense of community, but the difference is that all these communities are bound together by the fact that they exist in a 21st century city, a global metropolis. There are communities in Nebraska, but there's one thing that's different. If I live somewhere out in the Bronx, I can get Harding Park or Edgewater Park or any of these neighborhoods, I can get on a bus and I can be right here in Midtown Manhattan in 40 minutes. You can't do that in Nebraska. So what happens is that these people feel tied in to the larger city. They feel tied in to a city that's incredibly sophisticated. But at the same time, they value, cherish, and love the fact that when they come home to their community, they're in their own country.
You know, is it that much different to walk the pavement, to really look at it from that perspective than, let's say, sort of do it from 360 degree above? What do you get on the ground that you don't get any other way?
It's a great question. Walking at the pace that I do, it forces you to slow down. This isn't power walking. When you're driving by, A, you're seen as an outsider. B, you don't have a chance to absorb what you see. Riding a bicycle would probably be the next best thing, but it would have the same problems. And walking is a way of slowing down, appreciating every block, knowing every street, seeing what happens there, and interacting with the people, most importantly. In other words, when I walked into these neighborhoods, I didn't just walk by and take a look. Even though I do maintain that New York City is the greatest outdoor museum in the world. But I engaged the people, I had conversations with them, I went to shows, to bars, I went into the community. I sat around in parks, I played ball in these parks, I danced the bachata in Dominican bars in the South Bronx. I went to hear Beres Hammond, noted Jamaican singer.
Of course.
And I did all these things in order to understand what really makes this town tick.
And what makes it tick?
What makes it tick is that it's a collection of people from hundreds of different places and from over 100 countries. You know, when you think about it, we have people from 100 countries here, as I just said, but we have people who come from cultures that are likely to be at odds with each other in other parts of the world. For example, the Indians and the Pakistanis, Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, West Indians and African Americans. And even within West Indian groups, you have Haitians, you have Jamaicans, Barbadians. And nevertheless, they seem to get together and they seem to get along with each other tolerably well, by contrast with cities in Europe, like London, like Paris, that have all sorts of these problems. So the question is, why? In those countries, there are often efforts to restrict immigration and to force people to assimilate. We don't force people to assimilate here. We celebrate their culture. As long as their culture doesn't intrude on a national interest, we don't really care. And we don't want people to assimilate unless they want to. They have the right to assimilate. One of the things that was interesting about New York City was that if you take, for example, Queens, Douglaston is 100% white, 99% white, maybe 12% Asian. Cambria Heights is 100% black, maybe 99% black. The same would be true of
Queens Village and
Queens Village, any of those neighborhoods. But that's my choice today. 30 years ago, those neighborhoods were separate too, but it was because when people would go to real estate agents, they would be steered away.
Now, let me touch upon this, because I really want to talk about this before the interview is over. But how has immigration changed the city?
Immigration has changed the city because it's made it a more open place. Paradoxically, the more people come in, the more open people are to other ideas. Why? Because they're exposed to them. And that is the problem in Europe. My answer to Europe's problem is, you should allow more immigration, but make sure it's diversified, not less. Less isn't going to solve your problem. We know as sociologists that when there are 3 people in a room, 2 are inevitably going to gang up on the third. That doesn't happen when you have people from all these different cultures. And so my feeling is that immigrants have given life to the city. As far as they being able to be acculturated, to get along in New York City, we have the examples of the Irish, the Jews, the Germans, the Italians. When they came here 100 years ago, people said they were unassimilable. That didn't happen, and that's not happening today. So in that sense, New York being the bellwether of the rest of the country and maybe even the world, if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere.
You know, you mentioned Ed Koch. I was reading a passage in this book about his views on immigrants. They were pretty harsh. But during his administration, he wasn't particularly harsh on immigrants. So how do you put this disconnect together?
He's just a crusty guy. He's got a different way of saying things. He said that as far as he was concerned, they should deport undocumented people. And then I said to him, well, of course you may feel that way, but what, you know, you feel they're a drain on the health system, going to hospitals all the time? You think they're a drain on the educational system? He says, no, I don't say that at all. If you're sick and you're here illegally, go to a hospital. If you're a victim of a crime, go to the police. They're not going to deport you. But he says, I feel that if it's legal, then it's legal. If it's illegal, it's illegal. Why don't they make it legal? I wouldn't have a problem with that. So he looked at it from a lawyer's perspective. I do want to say something else about him. He was pretty alert when I talked to him. He was 88. I think I got one of the last interviews of him. And as I left, he says, "Don't forget your jacket." You know, he was just like a parent telling his child, do this, do that. I feel that his heart was in the right place. And I think that he was very different in practice from what he said.
You know, which neighborhood would you recommend that people should visit? It's an unknown secret in the city. Or the other side of the question is, what neighborhood do you think is not worth the hype?
Okay, to take the first side, I think they should visit places like Harding Park in the Bronx, a Puerto Rican paradise on the water where you can have $1 million view of the New York City skyline. There was some kind of a fight, a struggle, and they took it by virtue of the fact that they were squatters, and then they got to buy it for a couple of $1,000s. But it's at the edge of the Soundview neighborhood in the Bronx. Nobody really knows where it is. I would also recommend Edgewater Park. Edgewater Park is in the Bronx down by
You like the
river.
waterfront, huh?
Well, there's 771 miles of waterfront in New York City, and there are a lot of beachfront communities that are interesting to see. But at the same time, I would tell people to go to Greenwood Heights, which sits between Sunset Park and Park Slope. Just a very interesting neighborhood. I would say structurally, architecturally, Bay Ridge is really interesting. I would say that Greenpoint is a really interesting neighborhood, 100 years old, and there are a lot of things to see. Frankly, I don't have a neighborhood that I would tell people not to waste their time, because my opinion is that in every neighborhood there's something worth seeing. You just have to be able to find it.
All right, well, thank you very much, William Helkmright. Thanks for joining us.
You're quite welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, how 2 French immigrants are trying to spice up the school lunch. Finally, 2 savvy French women, overwhelmed by the task of bagging lunches for their children, have come up with a healthier and heartier alternative to cafeteria food. Their special delivery service called Inbox is more than just a startup. It's a way of bringing some French flavor to local lunches. Caroline Semama cooks dinner with her daughter Noah every evening. They're French citizens who have been living on the Upper East Side for the past 6 years. For them, eating healthy and well-balanced meals is a way of life. But that proved to be a problem when it came to lunches.
I don't prepare lunchbox. I have no time. I don't want to get involved. I'm working. I have 2 children. I cannot do everything.
Noah tried eating at her school's cafeteria, but she didn't like the lunches that were offered.
First of all, they weren't healthy at all, and they weren't tasty at all. Like the chicken, they had more grease than there was chicken.
Since a few weeks, she said, "Oh, I don't eat anymore for the lunch because the food is too disgusting." So I decided to buy the lunchbox, the Inbox.
Inbox is a lunch delivery service that's brought more than 2,000 healthy meals to families' doorsteps across Manhattan every morning for the last 6 months. Ingrid Calvo, a French immigrant and working mother of 2 children, came up with the idea after struggling with time management.
And every morning I have to prepare my lunchbox for them for 2 years. And it was a real nightmare for me because I have to prepare everything fresh cooked in the morning. You have to make your purchase before. And for a mom who works, it's very complicated.
So she partnered with a friend from college, Stéphanie Rubin, to create Inbox. Rubin had already been living in New York for more than 10 years. It wasn't just about creating a quick and easy service. For Calvo and her business partner, it was also about creating a healthy alternative to satisfy a cultural difference.
When I arrived in New York, it was I was very surprised because we don't eat in the same way here. They pick a lot of different things like a cheese stick or little crackers or something very easy to eat. it's not cooked at all.
So with the inbox, we really try to balance between the protein. We have greens, we have vegetables, fruits, we have dairy. So then it's balanced first, and that when the kid eats it, he's gonna eat the whole component. He doesn't have a choice in saying, you know what, I'm not gonna eat that part, or I'm going to eat it.
Chef Sheila Acosta has been creating these inbox menus. She's helped Calvo and Ruben create child-friendly seasonal meals that include ratatouille, salads, and salmon pasta.
It seems that our recipes are the good one because the kids eat all the meals we prepare, and the parents are also very surprised. My kid is eating vegetables, are you sure? Yes, it's true.
Like the varieties of choices. They have a lot of different meals every day, different types of stuff. Like there's meat, there's vegetables, there's sweets.
Chris Melico works with Chef Acosta and helps her prepare and pack the lunches the day before they're sent out. He even makes customized orders.
The dietary restrictions, food allergies, it's all something that Inbox takes into consideration when they're making the meals. And they're also healthy, it's fun. There's a prize in each box.
Inbox offers a healthy alternative. They use organic poultry and fish, as well as locally grown farmers' produce. But it comes at a price. A regular box goes for $9.90. The larger size box for $11.90. That's about 5 times more than the $1.75 NYC lunch ticket.
It's more expensive, but at the end of the day, if you think that, you know what, you're gonna have your $2 or change that you're spending at the school, and then the big snack you're gonna get the kid at the end of the day, which is sometimes like a slice of pizza or something like this. At the end of the day, you don't spend much more, but at least your kid is getting something balanced and healthy.
For now, Inbox delivers mainly to the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, Tribeca, and Chelsea. With growing demands in Queens, New Jersey, and outside the tri-state area, Inboxes may soon be feeding children in other parts of the country. That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Until next time, be independent-minded.